Hello everyone, it's Robin the Delta Crafter, and I want to thank you for joining me for another video on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be making a card using a watercolor technique where we'll be using distress ink refills as our watercolors. Let's get started. To start off, I have a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper. I have the Smile stamp and die set from Waffle Flower. My magic mat from scrapbook.com. I love this mat. I'll be using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, as well as some mint tape in the 4-inch size, also from scrapbook.com. I'll be using 3 Distress Ink refill colors, which are Kitsch Flamingo, Squeezed Lemonade, and Tumbled Glass. Let's go ahead and jump into making the card. This is going to be a 1-layer card where we will be masking off an area where the sentiment will be stamped. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create our mask. So using a piece of the 4-inch mint tape from scrapbook.com, I'm going to place a piece of this tape onto my magic mat. And then I'm going to place the die for the shadow layer of Smile onto that mint tape. And I'm going to die cut a mask from that mint tape with the die. So I'm just measuring my Smile shadow layer to make sure that I cut off a large enough piece of the mint tape. And then I'm going to take this and run it through my die cutting machine to create my mask. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I secure my die to my mint tape. And I'm going to use a piece of Easy C tape to do that. So I've run my die cutting sandwich through my die cutting machine. And now I have my mask cut and ready. To remove my mask from my whole mint tape background, I'm going to use my picker to kind of just gently pry up the mask from the magic mat. You want to be gentle when you're prying the mask up from the mat so that you don't tear it. Having a tool like this picker actually really helps you to be able to do that. So I'm just going to work from different sides and just work my way to the middle so that, again, I'm not tearing the paper mask that I've created. So now that I've gotten my mask off of my magic mat, I'm going to apply this mask to the middle of my card panel. Because I'm going to be using watercolors, I want to make sure that all the edges are very secure and pressed down on the mask. I really don't want my watercolor seeping up under the mask, so just go around the edges a couple of times and just make sure that everything is nice and secure. Now it's time to start watercoloring. I'm going to bring in all 3 of the Distress Ink refills that I'm going to be using for my watercolor. And I'm going to drop a couple of drops of the ink onto my glass mat here that I'm working with. This is a glass mat from Glassboard Studio. I have a video review on this mat. I absolutely love it. And I also have a discount code in the description box below if you'd like to pick up one for yourself. So I'm going to take my Distress water sprayer and spray some water onto each of my ink droplets. That's going to dilute the color because the color is very concentrated. But in order to be able to use it as a watercolor, I do want to dilute it down a little bit. So I'm going to bring in my brush and I'm going to start with that Kitsch Flamingo. And I'm just going to make some swashes of the color across my watercolor paper. And you can see there that the color is going on very, very lightly. And that's okay because that will work for this first layer of color that we're going to use. I rinsed off my brush in my cup of water that's off to the right. And then I can go into my second color, the Squeezed Lemonade. And then I'm going to clean out my brush again. And then I'm going to swash on some of that Tumbled Glass. I do want to make sure that my colors overlap just a little bit so that you can see new colors being created just a tiny bit from where the colors overlap. Because this is watercolor paper, the paper is absorbing quite a bit of the water, so I am going to use my heat tool to dry the ink, the watercoloring in between applications. Even though the mask looks like it's puckering a little bit, it is still secure to the paper, and it's doing the job that I'm wanting it to do. So now I'm going to come in with each of the three colors and add a second layer of color because I want to build up the color. I don't want it to be, for me, I didn't want it to be as pale as it was coming out, or as light as it was coming out. So I'm just going to add a little bit more color to each of the sections and build that color up. Plus, I also feel like that really gives it that authentic watercolor look. So you can see here I've built up the color quite a bit, and I've also put quite a bit of water onto this paper, so I'm going to dry it with my heat tool from the front and the back just to aid in the drying process. So now that my panel is dry, it's time to peel off the mask. And I'm going to take my time because the panel is not, I wouldn't say that it's 100% dry. And because of that, paper can tear when it's damp. And so I just want to take my time peeling up this mask so that I don't rip my paper. And you can see there that we are revealing a beautifully crisp white space that was hidden behind that mask. So the part where there was rippling in the stencil, the stencil still did its job. I love the way this looks already. I use the shadow die to make the mask because I'm going to stamp the word smile inside that shadowed area. So in order to do that, I'm going to place my card panel inside my MISTI, and I'm going to place my stamp inside the shadow area. So I'm getting that all set up now. This is a great stamp set from Waffle Flower. I love their stamp sets. They're large words, and they also have lots of sub-sentiments to go along that you can create all kinds of cards with the larger sentiment that's in the middle. I've chosen the sub-sentiment of "Your kindness makes me," and then it goes with "smile." So this will be a thank you card of sorts to give to someone. So I've got both of those attached to my MISTI door, and I'm going to bring in this VersaFine Onyx Black ink to use to make a crisp stamped impression of my sentiments. So I'm making sure that my sentiments are inked up very well. But again, because this is watercolor paper, it's textured. And so that means that you're probably going to have to stamp your sentiment a couple of times to get the best coverage. So I think I ended up stamping my sentiment 3 times with this VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Because this ink is a pigment ink, it's going to stay wet a little bit longer. So you want to make sure that you give it enough time to dry before you try to go do anything else to it, because you could potentially smear the ink. So now we're going to assemble our card. You may have noticed that I've switched panels. I had a little mishap with that panel that I was working on in the first part of the video. But don't worry, I ended up making several panels, and you'll see 2 completed and finished cards at the end of the video. In order to add some dimension to this 1-layer card, I'm adding some foam tape to the back of my panel. I trimmed down the panel just a tiny bit before I added that foam tape so that I would have a nice white border around the edge of my card panel. So now I'm taking off the backer tape off the foam tape, and I'm going to use my tweezers to place this panel onto my card base. My card base is made from Accent Opaque 120-pound paper. And all of the supplies I'm using today I will have listed and linked on my website at thedeltacrafter.com. So I've gotten everything nice and centered and secured to my card base. So as I was looking at the card, I felt like it was just a little bit too clean and simple. So I grabbed my Bubbles Iridescent Sequin Mix from the Diary of Belle Rose, and I'm going to add some of these to my card. These are from my crafty friend Marisha's Etsy shop, and I'm going to leave a link to her shop in the description below because you guys should really check out all the fantastic sequin mixes she offers. So I'm going to apply these sequins using my Barely Art glue. But before I do that, I'm going to place them around my card and just kind of get an idea of where I want to place them, how many I want to add, and all that before I actually secure them down. So now that I'm happy with my groupings, I'm going to use my glue and put some dabs of glue on there and place my sequins onto the glue. So I'm just securing the last few bits of sequins, and with that, this card is complete. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever watercolored with Distress inks or with Distress ink refills before. You can find out what I'm up to on Instagram and Facebook by following me at The Delta Crafter, and you can also join the family at my website at thedeltacrafter.com. I have all the products I used today listed and linked over there. Thanks for joining me and have a great day. Enjoy!